What's going on, Route 66 travelers? Hey, pulling off of the highway this week, taking a rest stop in Paul's fourth letter, the book of Galatians. Galatians. It's the charter of Christian liberty. It's Paul's defense of salvation by faith alone, and it's the Christian's declaration of independence. The idea that you are born free, so you should live free. And Galatians challenges us to walk through that door, asking two questions and a sub-third one in there that's connected. The first question it asks us is, do you know how to get right with God? That's a heavy question. Because see, in Galatia, there were false teachers that were telling them that they were going to be saved by just simply keeping the rules. It was a performance standard. And Paul said, okay, all right, so you're given two choices. There's either the grace that I've preached or there's the law, keeping the rules. And Paul says, why would God send Jesus if following the rules would lead to salvation? See, through the law, it's impossible to accomplish this because there's no way that you can be perfect and lead to salvation through that. Jesus Christ plus anything at all that you put in there is never going to be as great as simply Jesus Christ himself. Paul says to think otherwise is pointless when it comes to salvation. It is not by works, but by faith, he says, that we're saved. It's not about doing, but by believing that it's already been done, and that is the gospel. He says the righteousness is not gained through the law, and if it was, then Christ died for nothing. He says the righteous will live by faith, not by the law. So you have to stop trying to do, and you just have to choose to believe that it's been done. So how you get right with God is not by the works that you do, but by the faith that you have in Jesus Christ. So the second question then is if you know how to get right with God, then do you know how to live? And that third question will come into play here. See, if you're born free, Paul says, will you then live free? Backsliding is our biggest struggle in the known idea here. I mean, look at the Israelites. They got taken out of Egypt. They got set free. They're in the wilderness wandering around and thinking that they're going to die. And so they're like, no, I think we were better off in Egypt. At least we had a roof over our heads and 3 square meals a day. Well, we know that the path that we walk sometimes can look dry and it can look boring. And the path next to you might look really nice. You know, grass is greener on the other side, right? But you don't want to climb back over that fence to the idea of legalism, or today the area of license, this idea of, well, I live my reality and my truth. See, legalism wants you to live by the rules, but it's not by rules. Remember, it's but by faith. And the believers in Galatia, just like we do today a lot, we're starting to filter back to a performance standard in their living. And when you live the performance standard, then you make it tough on yourselves and you end up judging yourself. And when you do that, it seeps then into your view of others and you judge others by a performance standard. And Paul says that's not how Christ lived. And it's not how you should live either. And then there's that third question he puts in there. He kind of hides it in there. He says, don't you realize who you are now? Because you're not any longer who you used to be. You're not the person you once were. And he declares this loudly and proudly in chapter 2, verse 20. He says, I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live. It's Christ who lives in me. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, I can accept that by faith, and now he lives in me. I am no longer a slave. You are no longer a slave. We are Christ-filled, we are Jesus followers, and we are children of God. I'm no longer a slave tied down by the chains that once held me. I've been set free. Free. And I'm not just a child of God, but I'm an heir with Jesus. Paul told us that it was for freedom that Christ set us free. There was the whole purpose in this, was to no longer be slaves. God the Father sent Jesus because he wanted us to live free. The problem is that we fight against the urge to believe that these rules are going to lead to our salvation. And that's where the other danger begins to lurk, because we want to choose to live on our own terms. And we then take license to do whatever we think is right. And people who do that, they end up still enslaved. It's just they end up enslaved to themselves or to death or to sin or to the flesh or whatever it is that is controlling them and that they're addicted to and that they believe is their reality. Gosh, we see this overflowing in our culture today. And that's why we have to avoid license. And to do that, Paul says that you don't live by the flesh, you live by the Spirit that's been given to you. You're a child of God, and if you live by the Spirit, then you'll keep in step with the Spirit. Paul says that then that's when the fruit of the Spirit will manifest in you, and not by your power, but by God's. It will flow into you. That fruit of the Spirit that's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, the things that there is no law against. And the biggest battle we see against this is that performance-based world and society of, oh, I got to do this by my own power, in my self-powered way, or the my truth licensed living that I'm going to one-up everybody else. I'm going to be better than everybody else. Or in the church, I'm holier than thou. My sin is not as bad as your sin. I'm going to be the goat of the church. But see, hope comes from trusting the choice that you made to follow Jesus. Trust then comes from faith that it's already done and that he's going to continue to do as he says. Faith is what ends up setting us free. And if you've chosen Jesus, then you need to know that you're free. And when you choose Jesus, you're free indeed. You are no longer a slave. We are no longer slaves. No, we can stand and proudly declare we are children of God. Hey, keep studying in your family groups, individually, in your small groups. Keep getting into God's word. Keep memorizing those scriptures. And we'll see you next week when we step back on the highway and enter into Paul's next book to the church at Ephesus. That is his letter to the Ephesians. Until then, happy studying.